Hey everybody, welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. Recently I purchased the Wave 1 expansions for Masters of the Universe Battleground from Archon Studio. I've already uploaded a video talking about the first of these expansions, which featured Scareglow and Beast Man, as well as the pre-order incentive tokens I received for ordering direct. So, if you haven't seen that video yet, you might want to start there because any of my general opinions of the format for these expansions that I share in that video, I'm not going to be repeating here. I'm just going to get straight to the good stuff and take a look at the Masters of the Universe Wave 1 set, which features Teela and the Sorceress. If we look at the back of the box, we can see it says 2 generations of sorceresses, and the set includes 2 miniatures, 3 force field miniatures, a rules sheet, build instructions and 16 new game cards. Let's dive in. First we have the frame of miniatures, and just look at those 3 force field terrain elements. They are surprisingly large and chunky, and they cover 2 hexes on the battlefield each. They have an excellent design. I love the way parts of the battlefield are swirling around them. Really nice stuff. Then we have our 2 new characters, complete with scenic bases. Teela, who I really feel should have been in the base set, is in 6 pieces, including the base, while the Sorceress is in 5. I'm going to put the miniatures together at the end of the video, so we'll take a closer look at them then. The box includes a rules leaflet. This is the same as the rules leaflet in the Wave 1 Evil Warriors box, so it covers the rules for force fields, transporters, and clarifies the rules for a few new types of cards. The force fields are interesting. They occupy 2 hexes and they count as high obstacles for movement, but they don't block line of sight or provide cover. So really, they're just a way of disrupting melee-based teams. Anyone focusing on ranged magic and guns isn't going to be bothered in the slightest. I honestly feel like this is a bit backwards. I could see the force fields blocking line of sight and providing cover, while still being something that characters could walk through. I mean, they sure look like they would block line of sight. Oh, and they have 1 health, 0 toughness and 0 mind, so they are destructible. Here we have Teela's character card. She has 2 passive abilities. The first is Acrobatic, which allows her to make a free 2 hex move that cannot be interrupted when she interrupts an opponent. This ability highlights a common theme running through this expansion: movement and interrupting. Both Teela and the Sorceress excel at shutting down enemy plans with rapid responses and a high degree of adaptability. They have abilities triggering from interrupts, and skills promoting movement and having all of the options necessary to react to what their opponents are doing. Teela's second ability is Warrior Goddess, allowing her allies within 8 inches to reroll up to 2 dice during skill tests. This is an ability that works well in conjunction with the Sorceress, as we will see in a moment. Teela comes with her own sword. Its damage output is low and pretty inconsistent, but it has an excellent special ability. If you get 2 successes when attacking with the sword, you can perform a free 2 hex move action that cannot be interrupted. It's basically the same as her acrobatic skill, except triggering from attacks rather than interruptions. The important thing is that these movements cannot be interrupted, which opens up so many possibilities. It means she can quickly redeploy and make hit and run attacks, even darting between targets, disengaging from combat without facing attacks of opportunity, and even engaging characters who are on Overwatch without risk of facing an attack first. If you like skirmishers who focus on swift counterattacks and adaptability, Teela is a great choice. Next up is the Sorceress, and as a support class spellcaster, she's a little on the squishy side, only 4 health and a toughness of 1. She doesn't have great perception or strength either. Of course, she fares better in mind and magic, and she's incredibly mobile. When focused, she can move 10 spaces. I guess this could be interpreted as her transforming into Zor to make that move, but she doesn't gain any abilities allowing her to ignore terrain or anything like that. I'm actually a bit surprised that they didn't incorporate Zor into her abilities, perhaps even bundling her with a Zor miniature. But speaking of her abilities, we have Vision of the Future. She can test her mind value, and for every success, look at the top fate card from a deck, and then replace all those cards in any order. The wording on the card is a bit weird and implies you can steal fate cards from one deck to put into another, but that isn't the case. I've had that confirmed by the game's designer. You can just use the power to sneak a look at your opponent's cards and then reorder them to scupper their plans, or else use it to sift your own deck for the most useful cards for your own short-term goals. Her second skill is Telepathic Guide. When she interrupts, she can pick a character within 12 inches and test her magic -1. If she gets 2 successes, the target ally gets to interrupt the same enemy, even if they are out of range of that enemy. This is a great way to team up on the target, quickly reposition your characters, or even get the Sorceress out of trouble by using a nearby ally as a bodyguard to leap to her aid. Her unique item is the Staff of Power. It's a melee weapon which isn't all that great in combat, but as with Teela's Sword it has a good ability. When she interrupts, she gains a mana token, which means she is immediately in a position to cast Telepathic Guide during the interruption, which costs 1 mana. Furthermore, her magic attacks are treated as skill tests and attack tests, which means they will benefit from any bonuses that wouldn't normally affect magic tests. Viewers who are on the ball will notice that creates a great synergy with Teela, whose Warrior Goddess ability grants a bonus to the skill tests of allies within 8 inches. Looking at the rest of the cards in the expansion, we get 4 new weapons. The first is the Bionatops Blaster, which seems like an odd inclusion for this set, as although it is powerful and long ranged, its strength comes from a +3 dice attack bonus if the user takes the time to aim properly and doesn't move. Considering Teela and the Sorceress rely on movement, this probably wouldn't be a good option for them. Besides, neither of them are allowed to take a ranged weapon anyway, they don't have a suitable equipment slot. Next is the Spear, pretty straightforward, decent damage potential, and can attack from 2 hexes away. Magic Arrow is a good card for the Sorceress, used during interruptions. It doesn't suffer a penalty to the magic test scope, has a decent range of 12 inches, and if it generates at least 2 successes, an ally within 8 inches gains a focus token. Finally, we have Illusionary Attack, which is quite unusual. You have to test magic before using it, gaining an additional attack dice per success, which is essential because Illusionary Attack reduces your attack by 2 dice as standard. When you roll to attack, regardless of the number of successes, the maximum damage output is just 1, but you may get to draw up to 2 fate cards. This is a double-edged sword. On the one hand, more fate cards in your hand gives you more options and more chances to drop extra cards on a character during their activation so they can get more done. However, you never get to shuffle your discarded fate cards back into your deck. You only have 20 to last you the whole game, so if you draw a lot of extra cards and use them frivolously, you may find the last few turns of the game quite unpleasant as you lack the cards necessary to activate your characters. Next we have 4 new items. One is a shield, the Steel Shield, which grants a focus token if you are targeted from a frontal melee attack. This is an exceptionally good defensive item and I can see myself using it a lot. It's also nice to see a new shield added to the game as there are only a couple at the moment. I'm still waiting for a shield that looks like He-Man's. We then have 3 trinkets. The forcefield rod, which you discard to place 3 force fields, and that's how those unique terrain elements are introduced. Then we have Corrodite, which lets you draw a fate card if you roll at least 2 successes when attacking during an interruption. Again, it's nice to have an extra fate card for more options, but always remember to use them with care as you don't want to run out too soon. Finally, we have the Tiara. If the character's skill test results in at least 2 successes, gain a mana token. Obviously this item was custom made for the Sorceress, who can treat magic attacks like skill tests during interruptions, but it will be useful for any character who hangs around with Teela and benefits from her Warrior Goddess skill. We've almost got through everything now, just 3 fate cards and 1 glory card to go. The first grants 2 action points and 2 mana and has a really nice bonus of awarding the character with a focus token if they have at least 3 successes during a skill test. The second card grants 2 action points and sets the character's mana to 3. The final one grants 1 action point and 2 mana, but also adds +1 to the scope of all skill tests. As you can see, all 3 are useful for Teela and the Sorceress due to the focus on making skill tests and gaining mana. The glory card is also really useful for a team that relies heavily on interrupting an opponent's play. It grants 2 action points and 2 mana, but if you play it during an interruption and you knock out an enemy, you score 30 victory points. It might take a bit of setting up, but if you can get the drop on an enemy with an attack of opportunity or an interruption from Overwatch, you could net 30 victory points relatively easily. And that is everything. The final thing to note is that as with the other expansion, they haven't included any points in the box for including these characters and cards in your force. That information is available online and I will link to it in the video description below. But just so you know, Teela with her sword is 20 points and the Sorceress with the Staff of Power is 19 points. It's a good set overall. I'm really pleased to have the Sorceress and Teela in my collection. They seem to be very useful, adaptable characters with some interesting potential for combos and sneaky maneuvers. I like their focus on interruptions and skill tests much more than Scareglow's focus on applying debuffs. I guess I am a little bit disappointed with the force fields. Disrupting movement rather than ranged attacks doesn't seem quite as interesting to me, and also feels a little strange mechanically. But enough about that, let's see what these miniatures look like put together. First of all, we have the 3 force fields. These are all single piece miniatures, so there's no assembly, you just have to snip them out of the frame and then clean up any mould lines. And really, the mould lines weren't too bad. About a minute each with a craft knife and these are good to go for painting. And I do think these force fields are really nice miniatures. They are a good size, they are chunky, they feel weighty, they're not going to fall over during gameplay, and I really love the swirling design that incorporates elements of the battlefield. You can see bits of the stone breaking off and starting to swirl around. There's one with a skull floating around in it. I think my favourite is the one that is absorbing bits of futuristic tech. And of course, because you are getting those 3 large terrain elements as well as the 2 miniatures, it does feel like this Wave 1 expansion is slightly better value than the one that had Scareglow and Beast Man in it, because that expansion only came with 2 small teleporters. Moving on, here we have the Sorceress, and this is a really nice miniature. I love the posing. She is stepping forwards, raising her arms. You can imagine she is about to transform into Zor there. It's a really nice pose and the detailing is excellent. I love her cloak, I love the feathers. Her staff is really nice. And the whole miniature has a great shape. It has a sort of diamond shape with the cloak spreading out behind her. Really, really interesting. And putting the miniature together, you can't really see the join lines either, because they did this really interesting thing with the cape. Where the cape met the body, they did a bit of an overlap, so the cape actually conceals the join line to a certain degree. And it makes the whole miniature feel a little bit more like it's a single piece rather than several elements glued together. I also want to draw attention to the staff. It's a long, thin element, but they have sculpted this miniature in such a way that the thinness of the staff isn't a concern. You can see that parts of the cape are overlapping the staff, which is strengthening that part of the miniature, and then the very tip of the staff, which could be prone to breakage, sits inside the heel of her boot and then reaches right down to the ground on the scenic base and sits there in such a way that the whole miniature is encompassing the staff and protecting it. It's a very clever design. Just a fantastic miniature all around. I have no complaints with this one at all. And then we have Teela. She has a really striking dynamic pose. She is up on one leg. There are quite a few miniatures in the Masters of the Universe Battleground line that are on one leg. It seems to be something the sculptors like to do, but they always seem to do a really good job of making sure the centre of balance is such that the miniature never feels like it's going to topple or fall over. They are really sturdy and well balanced. And I love the movement through the miniature. I love that strong line leading off from that leg that she's pushing away from, which is parallel with the staff that she's holding, and then moving up into that swinging blow with her sword. I think it's just a beautifully put together miniature. Join lines are almost invisible. They will show up a little bit better on the camera here because I'm zooming right in on the miniature, but those joins are quite hard to spot at first glance. And again, Teela has a long thin staff like the Sorceress, which could be prone to breakage, but they have done a very clever thing here where they have made sure that the staff rests across her back, so the actual positioning of the miniature itself is protecting that staff and making sure that that thinnest part of the staff isn't sticking out in such a way that it might easily snap off. I actually placed a little bit of plastic glue on her back, exactly where the staff touches, for an extra bit of reinforcement, and I can't see any breakages being an issue here. Certainly not compared to some other miniatures I've seen that have thin elements that are sticking out in all directions. I think the sculptors have been very clever in how they have done this. But that's all I have to say about this really. I think we have 2 really good miniatures and 3 really nice scenic elements and some really good new cards to introduce to the game. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please consider pressing the like button. If you really enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so, and hopefully I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.